Hi, everyone. Let's call it Wellness Wednesday here. I'm Razzie Berry, publisher of Naturopathic Doctor News and Review and Natural Path. And today we have a real treat in store for you. For Wellness Wednesday, we're talking with a naturopathic physician that I admire so much. And I've had the pleasure of really getting to know her more in this last year. And it is Dr. Nicola Dellinger. She is in private practice in Durango, Colorado, and sees patients from all over the world in her practice, in her online programs, and also her retreats. So we're going to learn more about what she does, but she has a specific focus with really blending the mind and body towards wellness. And it's going to be a lot of fun because today, some of the concepts we're going to be talking about are how to tame your inner critic, which I know I definitely have an inner critic that pops up when I really don't want her to. And I know that can get in the way of our relationships and our work and in our well-being. So Dr. Nicola is an expert in this area. So it's a real treat to have her here. And she's also going to tell us about a special program that she has where you can work with her virtually through an amazing course to learn how to tame your inner critic and be your own best friend. So welcome, Nicola.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, it's always fun when we get together. You really have a special gift with the whole mind body axis towards health and wellness. And maybe first you can share your own story of how this came to be a special focus of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably not that different than a lot of you guys who are listening. I grew up learning that things happened a certain way, that I needed to be a people pleaser and kind of achieve in order to feel validated and loved. I didn't really notice that or know that at the time, but I just knew that I felt kind of off. And what really started me on this path was a horrible breakup, which I think, usually we have some sort of event that propels us into this world of self-discovery. And so I went into therapy and I was diligent. I went every week. I never missed for 9 months, and kind of came to a point in time where I was like, okay, so we've been talking about this and now I understand my family system a little bit more, but when do I drop this part of me that's a total pain? It's causing me all this trouble. And my therapist looked at me and she literally doubled over in laughter. And she's like, oh, honey, did you think you were here to be different? I was like, yeah. Hours of my life, thousands of dollars, like that's why I'm here, is to not be me anymore, to be different. And she's like, oh, that is not what we're here for. I was so pissed. I left her office. I didn't come back for a month. And then finally I kind of re-engaged with her and we, learned a little bit more about what that meant. And so we really kind of came to a place where she said, okay, I think this is a good place for us to pause, because what's really required right now is for you to just love yourself more. And I nodded my head because I'm a people pleaser and I wanted to not fail her, right? There's the therapist that I'm paying, but I'm worried about letting her down if I didn't understand what that meant after a year in therapy. So I nodded my head and I went out not having a clue around how to do that. Like, what does that mean to just be nicer to yourself? If it was that simple, we'd all just choose it, wouldn't we? I mean, it just kind of seemed like this basic thing. So over the next number of years, I got myself into a pretty emotionally abusive marriage and a job where I really just wasn't respected or appreciated. And so kind of these things coming together at the same time were really undoing my sense of self. I was just kind of eroding. And then I had a kiddo. And I realized that something had to change. And that's kind of what moved me into this exploration of what it means to really, love yourself more. And the way that I really, and I read books, I took retreats, I worked with different healers of all sorts of backgrounds. And what I realized was that what I really needed more than anything was to always be present to myself, no matter what. And so have really kind of cultivated that practice over the years and incorporated mind-body techniques and some work from IFS, which is internal family systems, and have kind of really figured out how to actually love yourself differently. So that's kind of, my personal story around how I got into this, and that what allows me to realize that I can actually guide others in this process too, because I think it's pretty daunting, the idea of become your own best friend. It's like, what if I could, but it's a lot of work to do between here and there.
Yes, and something that you mentioned in the brief story that you shared with us about how you got here was when you wanted to please your therapist. And I think that's part of when we lose ourselves. I've been there before. I remember having a therapist years ago that I would actually lie to her because she had this certain expectation that she had or thought I should feel a certain way, and I started to realize, wow, I'm paying this woman to help me through this, and I don't feel like I want to please her, so I'm not being authentically honest with her.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is really gets in the way of healing. So when you work with clients, how do you create that space so they feel safe to be honest with themselves?
Sure. I mean, I think for me as a guide in this process, the most important thing is to help the person I'm sitting with discover what their agenda is. Because it might not be weight loss, or it might not be quitting cigarettes, or it might not be not having diarrhea anymore. All of the things as a naturopathic doctor, that's my lens, right? Like, oh, we can do these things, but that's really my agenda and not the person who's sitting in front of me. So step one is, why are you really here? And, what's important to you? So, maybe weight loss, for example, is something that's going to be secondary to the work that we're doing, but why would that matter? What difference would it make? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I would enjoy the outdoors more. I would be able to run after my kids with more energy, or I'd feel sexier for my partner, or whatever that is. And all of a sudden now we've got the real intrinsic or internal motivator that's going to get us to actually make some lifestyle changes, because we all know what's good for us and bad for us. And so this continuation of judgment and shame and guilt around making health choices or lifestyle changes has gotta end. We gotta really have a more authentic conversation around what's really motivating us here and what's important. And it's not always dropping the cigarettes first thing.
Yeah. And so what do you think, as a physician, what do you feel is the reason that people become people pleasers, and how does that affect not only their emotional health, but their physical health?
Yeah, there's actually some really interesting neuroscience around the perfectionist or the inner critic. And there's actually, so the inner critic, they've actually done research to find out which part of the brain it resides in. And it resides in that survival mode part of our brain, where it is wired to feel anxiety, stress, guilt, blame, remorse, you name it, all the lovely things that we experience. But evolutionarily, it was actually meant to help us to learn from our mistakes. We review our mistakes once or twice, and then we learn, and in the future, we might not suffer. So it's actually meant to be a benefit to your whole person. What's happening in our culture, however, is that we're reviewing this mistake hundreds, thousands, or seemingly millions of times. And we're getting kind of caught up in that story of not good enough. So, I don't know if any of you have ever, spent time with babies or little kids, or seen them out in the street where they're just dancing and, getting their groove on, and they don't care. They're not paying any attention. You may not remember feeling like that, free to be in your person ever, but you were. I promise there was a day that you have had in this lifetime on this earth where you felt like, I'm awesome and I'm in my person, and it's totally cool for me to do whatever I want to do. I'm going to throw a tantrum right now. I'm going to dance right now. I'm going to laugh at my toes. We were all born with that inherent knowing that we're amazing and brilliant. And what happens along the way, somewhere around 12 to 18 months, is that we start getting mobile, essentially. And so we can get into more stuff. And so we start being corrected. So we break something, we touch something that we're not supposed to, we annoy our older sibling maybe, and they yell at us or tell us that we're stupid. And we start internalizing these messages of being wrong simply because we're trying to explore the world around us. And then we kind of move into preschool and kindergarten, and then we start realizing that maybe we're not as fast as, our classmates, or as smart, or, we look different, or, whatever these messages. And we start internalizing all of these messages that we're not good enough, and that we've got to really work hard to be different and better, and really can't rest because this is a survival thing. We're not going to be loved. We're not going to be valued. We're not going to be taken care of unless we get this piece going quickly. And so that's kind of how things evolve over time.
It's fascinating the way there's a whole developmental aspect to this. Yeah. And so let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
So most people, most research will look towards early childhood and early life experiences as a way that trauma affects us, or developing or to be less resilient, for instance, and what we're talking about today, the inner critic. Mm-hmm. How do you feel that later life, as as a physician, as a naturopathic physician, have you seen that instances that happen later in life can develop this as well, or is it always from what happened in childhood?
Oh yeah, it can be any experience that we don't, honestly, it sounds so simple, but that we don't fully allow ourselves to presence, that then kind of lodges in our cellular memory. And when, we talk about emotions and cellular memory, I have a lot of people that kind of go blank. But I use the example of, if you learned how to ride a bike and you haven't ridden a bike in 20 years, you could probably pick up a bike and just ride it. You wouldn't have to spend 2 weeks figuring it back out again. And that's cellular memory. And so these patterns and these experiences actually inhabit our cells, and we continue to play them out on some level of our being, energetic, physiological, cellular, and that manifests in all sorts of ways, be it mental distress with anxiety, depression, insomnia, or physiological complaints, headaches, digestive upset, you name it. So it can show up in a lot of ways. And there's a ton of research that supports this idea of a history of trauma. And it doesn't have to be a capital T trauma, like there was this one event or this recurrent event. It could be just small little things that you interpreted as traumatizing. Maybe you had a teacher who was particularly harsh on you, or maybe your mom just didn't love you in the same love language that you receive love in. So that, so it's not that your parents are to blame, or we need to villainize our parents. It's kind of the joke in psychotherapy, like, oh my God, I'm going to talk about my mom. But it's not about blaming them. It's just maybe understanding where the skill set that your parents brought maybe did or didn't match your need.
That idea of how we interpret something is so wild and so big. When you get to be, into your adulthood and look back at all sorts of relationships with children, parents, significant others, it's so amazing how two people can be in one relationship, but be in very different relationships.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah, it's so true. And that's all based on the lens of our experience and that voice of the inner critic that's telling you, see, he doesn't love you either, or he doesn't think you're a good communicator, or, whatever. And you've been worrying about this, right? And so all of these experiences kind of help to deepen that foundation of doubt. And the louder our critic gets, the more in the way it gets of our own knowing or intuition. And you and I have talked about intuition quite a bit. Yes. That's something that everybody has access to, but we just come to doubt it or suppress it because it doesn't have the right answer, around what we should be doing.
Yeah, you and I have talked a lot about intuition, and it fits so nicely into the principles of naturopathy, this idea that the body is self-healing, and
Yes.
that really we just get in its way. And one of the ways we do that is through this idea, or this inner critic, and not being kind to ourselves. And if you've just joined us, I'm Razzie Berry, and I'm talking today on Wellness Wednesday with Dr. Nicola Dellinger. And she is an expert in mind-body medicine, mind-body healing. And she sees patients from all over at her clinic in Durango, Colorado, where she sees them in private practice. She does group and private retreats. And she also has a course that we're going to talk about in a minute. It's really wonderful. It's really a gift to give to yourself with regard to what we're talking about, this inner critic. So thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to hear where you're from. If you have questions for Dr. Nicola, please post them in the comments and we'll do our best. And there's also some information how to find her clinic, Pura Vida Healthcare, and also to download a special gift she has. She has a guide about how to tame your inner critic. It's just a really fun guide. It's beautifully designed. And so be sure to grab it while you can. So Nicola, let's segue from this idea of emotions and cellular memory. Maybe if you could speak to our audience, how does that affect our physical health? And so when you see patients that, most patients that come to a naturopathic physician have been other places first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so you offer, as you say, a different lens. You look at this in a different way. So how do you look at the way that the self-critic that comes from these past traumas or stored emotions affect your patients physically?
Sure. It's a great question. I think the first and foremost is that we have to stop separating mind and body. I talk about that I do mind-body medicine all the time, but that infers that there's a separation somewhere, that there was a separation along the way. And I'm here to tell you there is not. Your physical body is constantly influencing your emotional body and vice versa. And this is just from basic physiology. We understand physiology is that there's an energetic shift, and then there's a cellular shift, and then there's a physiological shift. So how you show up in your body makes a huge impact on how you're going to express health, vitality, or a dis-ease. So that's kind of what's going on, just as a foundational piece that it's kind of become a pet peeve of mine, this idea that we need to go to somebody different to address our mental health than we do to address our physical health. And so then, the other piece of this that comes up is that if we're constantly in a worry state of mind, a perfectionist state of mind, we're never enjoying, appreciating ourselves and enjoying the fruits of our own labors, then we're going to be stressed out. We're going to experience that stress response in the body. Now, cortisol, which is the main stress hormone, has two main functions in the body. One is to manage stress, and the other that we forget about is to manage inflammation. So you'll know that if you've been on hydrocortisone or corticosteroids, those are some of our prescriptive powers, are the most powerful anti-inflammatories that we have on the market. But when we can step back and realize that evolutionarily, it's more important for cortisol to go down that stress system, because if you've gotten attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, it doesn't matter if you've got a bum knee, it's more important to shoot that cortisol down the stress management pathway. And so the more and more we're sending cortisol down that pathway, the less there is to actually support healthy inflammation in the body. And inflammation, as we now know, is the underlying cause of every single chronic disease that you could possibly imagine, from diabetes to Parkinson's to depression to congestive heart failure, blood pressure, any sort of irritable bowel or any sort of digestive issue. So on and on and on it goes. And so I think we forget this piece, especially I just did a talk last week on managing inflammation naturally. And everybody wants to talk about anti-inflammatory foods and how bad corn is and all this sort of stuff, which is true. But my point is if you're eating this beautiful kale salad with hand-caught salmon and raw organic pumpkin seeds, which is all amazing, but you're doing it in a hurry, or you're worrying about something else, or you're not present to your meal, that's creating inflammation. So it's not just so much what you're putting into your system, but the environment, the vessel in which you're receiving that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this connection, I like how you state that there's not really there's not really a separation between mind and body, and it is sort of baffling that you go to two different people to treat your mind and the body, and it's so segmented. So with that, how do you reframe? Because it's probably, I mean, can we ever totally get rid of our inner critic, or as you have said, how do we learn to work with our inner critic?
Yeah. And that's just it. We don't want to get rid of our inner critic. We don't want to not learn from our mistakes or, kind of have wisdom that comes with experience. So it's not about getting rid of your inner critic. It's about understanding that the inner critic is actually on your side when you are in relationship to him or her. And so for most of us, most of you maybe who are hearing me are like, if you knew how nasty she was, you would never ask me to listen to her more. But it's not that you're giving her free rein to have a torrent of abuse and criticisms. It's more about finding out what's the true intention of this critic. And more often than not, the true intention is to have us live our biggest life, to be our most successful person, to get out of a bad situation. That inner critic wants the same thing for you that your highest self wants for you. She or he maybe just has a really kind of warped way of going about it. And once that inner critic realizes, wow, not only are you not getting your desired outcome, but you're actually creating more of what you're trying to avoid, then they're receptive to being in conversation in a different way. So it's actually about building an actual relationship with this part of yourself where there's back and forth dialogue, and the inner critic can pop up and go, do you really want to, go on a second date with that guy? And it's like, oh, thanks, inner critic. That's a really good question. And we can kind of come back in rather than like, whatever the tape may be playing about that second date.
What are some common inner criticisms that you find, like patterns that you see with people that maybe show up over and over, just so someone listening might feel like that they're not alone?
Yeah, sure. There's no shortage. And no, I have not bugged your brain and listened to these, because when I say some of these, people are like, how did you know that that's exactly what it says? But the biggest pieces are around not being lovable or not being valued. And so it's, I'm so stupid, or I don't deserve to be happy. Of course, I'm blanking on them now. My inner critic is like, oh, see, you're not prepared. But it's just this constant self-doubt around, are you sure you want to make that choice? It's almost like this, you can't be trusted to make your own choices. And so a lot of them are just around, you haven't done enough, you aren't enough. You shouldn't. Oh, this is a big one. This is something I talked to somebody about yesterday. Is this overarching fear that if we were to share our authentic truth with somebody, that they would absolutely reject us? So if you're, let's say, I'm thinking about this woman in particular. So she's getting married this weekend, and her mom has just been really unsupportive. She hasn't oohed and awed over her dress. She hasn't offered to help make anything. Anyway, it goes on and on. And so she's been holding on to this. And she told me she finally, told her mom, hey, enough. I'm getting married. Like, this is how you're supposed to show up. This is how you show me you love me. And she was scared to death. And sure enough, her mom heard her. And now in the month that's passed since she did that, they're super close. Mom's coming to the wedding. She's actually arriving today to help her and show up. And I think that that's a really, really good example of how we are constantly telling ourselves, don't tell somebody your truth. You got to keep it together. You got to present the package in a certain way. Because if they knew what really went on inside your head, they would not love you. Because we feel like we're not worthy. We're not enough. We're not lovable. That's Christina was just sharing some of those comments too. So I think these are the kind of the common themes, and then they can have different heads based on your personality type. But it's amazing to me what can happen. Oh, and the same client was telling me that she's been saying no to some of her clients, and she's cultivating. All of a sudden, she's got more referrals and she knows what to do with, because she's cultivating her work to work with people that support her and value her only. She also raised her rates by 20%, which she was really scared to do. So it was this really interesting dialogue around, how showing up as more of you, being more authentic, is actually going to bring in everything that you've ever wanted. But that critic is going to tell you, oh, no, like, don't do that. Don't be more authentic. Don't be more of your true you, because bad things are going to happen.
Well, and you gave an example a minute ago when you said maybe, should I go on that second date? And with regard to earlier, we're talking about being a people pleaser. Sometimes there's this, like I know one of mine has been often to look away. So like create a narrative around something and look away from the truth. So maybe I would just be pleasing this person and going on a second date, even though my authentic self isn't really a good match. I'm not, I'm just kind of making things, these I'm sure have been part of my experience. It's not a current experience I'm doing right now. So if you're listening, no. But it's just this idea of looking away from ourselves, and just looking at what the other person wants. So we will meet, I think this is what you're saying. So we'll meet those needs of, like, we're not feeling lovable, we're not feeling worthy, we're not feeling smart or good enough.
Right.
And so it's like we play those out in these relationships. Yep.
So rather than listen to your intuition of like, this really isn't a fit, we go out with them again, and it's kind of like, oh, we try to make it fit, and like, oh, he was okay with, these 4 traits, and I'm going to just ignore the truth of the other screaming red flag. Or maybe they're not even red flags. Maybe they're just more subtle. But when you choose you say, you know what, actually, it's really important to me that he knows how to fish. And it's like, but your inner critic's like, well, you can't just toss out this guy because he doesn't know how to fish, because he's okay. He's got a job, actually, and you might not get better than that, So we start talking ourselves into and suppressing that intuition. And then that's how we get into yet another bad relationship, or a job that's not a fit, or we stay in a career for a long, long time, or, we just stay in these kind of lower vibrational relationships or situations.
Yeah. So we're talking with Dr. Nicola today, Nicola Dellinger from Durango, Colorado, where she sees patients and clients from all over, does personal and group retreats, and also has a course about this very topic. So Nicola, let's talk about your course. And before you do, I want to invite everyone to come here in the comments and download your free ebook. She's got a beautifully designed ebook about taming your inner critic, learning to love yourself more, and becoming your own best friend. So will you talk about the course you're also offering?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it really came out of a lot of conversations I have with my patients in office, but then also in, Facebook groups and that sort of stuff, where when we start authentically talking about how hard we are on ourselves, everybody starts nodding and going, yeah, me too. But what do I do about it? So I ended up writing this book about, kind of being in relationship to your inner critic in a different way. And I got literally hundreds of responses saying, thank you so much. This has totally shifted my relationship, even just from reading it, because now, rather than being hooked into the story, we can see that inner critic as just a part of ourselves who may or may not, have a good strategy for getting us what we want. So out of that was born this program of becoming your best friend, that to really help people kind of deepen into these practices and get support of a group environment, because I think a lot of us think that we are the only ones that feel this way. And we see the pictures on Facebook or Instagram and all these shiny, happy people, and they have this great life and they don't talk to themselves this way, or they don't have fears about themselves in this way. So I really wanted to create a group environment so that we can really support each other as we authentically shift our relationships with these, years long, conversations that are just getting in the way of us really living a life that's turned on, that sparks. And I see that so often. And I think that's really contributing to health issues, not just mental health issues like anxiety and depression, but a lot of other health issues as well. Pain certainly being a big one, digestive issues, cardiac issues, blood sugar issues, where we don't allow ourselves to be nourished by our environment. We keep on pushing ourselves to do what we think we have to do in order to get what we think we want. But really, we're kind of dying inside.
That's really sad, but true statement from many people, really dying inside, especially with what you talked before towards this cellular memory of these emotional traumas and these cycles that we get stuck in. And sometimes it's like this self-sabotage, and other times we're trying to undo these things, but we just keep getting stuck in a loop. So what are some of the steps in the course that you will walk people through to help them, really be present in themselves and be their authentic selves?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to do this really gentle because I know that a lot of people don't really have a lot of time and space, or think that they don't have a lot of time and space to take care of themselves in the way that they know that they could. And so I've set it up so that it should feel really, really accessible. And so we're going to do one live call a month, and that's where I'll be doing a little bit of teaching. And then I want to create plenty of time and space for each person to talk about their own experience, where they're getting stuck, where they're having successes. And then we'll use each other's experiences as a guide for how to get out of there. Because I guarantee you, if you are feeling a certain way or having a certain experience, somebody else in the group, if not all of us, are going to relate to what you're saying and benefit from hearing about that. So some of the topics we're going to talk about are, unconditional love, which I think is a foreign concept for so many of us. So many of us have grown up learning that there are conditions and parameters that allow us to feel love, and then everything else. And we're going to talk about self-care as service, because I feel like so many people, especially women, kind of get into this negative feedback loop that if I take care of myself in a really positive and joyous way, then that's selfish, or I'm letting somebody else down, or I'm not taking care of somebody else in my world. So we're going to talk about how taking care of ourselves is really an act of service for everyone in our community. We're going to talk about how to let go of guilt and resentment and resistance, because so oftentimes a big part of this is simply being resistant to what's here. So we're going to teach some very specific tools around how to make more space for what's here and be in a more neutral place, as opposed to having judgments around it. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how to listen to and then heal your inner critic, and really walk through exactly what that looks like and how to do that. And then the final topic we're going to touch on is self-love and pleasure. And this is something that we all, who doesn't want more pleasure in their world? But so many of us, yeah, you say, great, we'll get you all signed up. But this is the issue, right? Is that life is supposed to be hard. And it's like, you talk to somebody on a Monday and it's like, oh, I had such a busy weekend and it was super productive. And I took down 7 trees and planted whatever, and it's like this crazy review of what happened over the weekend. And so even our fun time has got to be very productive. And so really kind of stepping into adopting pleasure as a way of creating more of what you want in the world. Again, not just for you, but for everybody else. Because I guarantee you, on those days where you show up and you've worn something that you love how it looks and how it feels, and maybe you took a nice bath before you went out and you fed yourself your favorite food, and then you go out into the world, everyone is picking up on that vibe and they want to stand in your light. So this is really about learning how to stand more in your brilliance, which so many of us are, afraid to do. But the truth of that is, the more I stand in my light and my brilliance, the more of an invitation it is for you to stand in your light and your brilliance. And then we get to celebrate everybody. So this course is really designed to teach you how to light back up again.
Oh, this is great, because this is what I think happens. Tell me if this is what happens, that you feel bad about yourself because of this inner critic. And so you aren't standing in your light. I like the way you say that. But then you're afraid to stand in your light because you're afraid people aren't going to like you if you're standing in your light.
That's exactly right. Or that you'll be seen and that people will see your flaws and your, kind of ickier parts. But this is about if, you can't really to love you in a way that you're not willing to love yourself. And so when we learn to love ourselves, like radically accept all of who we are and come to a place of, not necessarily peace, but maybe just neutrality, or at least acceptance of like, oh, there's that piece again that's doing X, Y, and Z. We can dance with those parts of ourselves differently. And then people in our world will then show up and respond to us differently too.
We have a question specifically about the course, and I'm not sure if you want to refer them or answer, but Rich is asking, what's the schedule for the course? What time are the calls?
Yeah, so the calls are gonna be on Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So that's 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern. I tried to find a place that no matter where you are in the States or beyond, that it would be a good time for you. And so we're going to do those, but they all will be recorded. So if you're going to miss a call or you can't make it for some reason, there'll be plenty of opportunities to listen to that and ask questions. We're also going to have a private Facebook group. That's going to be a great place to connect with other people and share information. And then we're also going to have pre-recorded webinars with experts in the love is medicine field, like yours truly, Ms. Raspberry, and a couple of other docs and mindfulness teachers. So we're really going to have plenty of information for you. Oh, and there's also going to be a Befriending Yourself journal that I created specifically to go along with this course. And that's something that you can work on at your own pace. And so it's really a question of, how much time can you create in your world, and so this can be an ongoing process. But I think that journaling, or at least having questions that have us thinking a little bit more deeply in a meditative or reflective sort of way, are a crucial part of that process.
Beautiful. So thanks for that question, Rich.
Yeah.
So if you're just joining us now, or if you've been listening, I'm here with Dr. Nicola Dellinger, who has an amazing mind-body naturopathic medicine practice. And she has this beautiful ebook about taming your inner critic. So I encourage you to share it with others. It's free, and download it today. And you can also go there to learn more about the course she has. This really, I like the schedule of it. It's kind of an unconventional schedule for a course, but it is very like low stress, one call a month. Yeah. You can really dive into that and not feel like, how am I going to fit this in? Because that's what prevents me sometimes with courses. This is like, I love it and I want to do it, but I just don't know where I'm going to fit it in.
Yeah. Or you sign up and then you can't make the weekly calls and you get out the whip because you didn't do it right again. And, so that I was very, very intentional with setting up the schedule of this course so that it felt like, you know what? I've got 2 hours a month for me. Like I can do that. And because we're facing an epidemic where people are ashamed and downtrodden and not very happy. And so it's really time for us all to step in and be in relationship with ourselves differently so that we can then be that beacon of light for everybody else in our world. And then they can step into more of who they are too.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Nicola, for sharing this with us. I love having beautiful opportunities like this for everyone at Natural Path and Naturopathic Doctor News and Review and our communities there, because it's really in alignment with these naturopathic philosophies, and you're quite the expert in the area. So I appreciate you so much and your time. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. Please You can continue to comment here and ask questions, but please download your ebook so you can learn more about this subject and just take that time for yourself. And again, Dr. Nicola's course, 2 hours a month for yourself to really learn about some of these emotional cellular memories and why you have this inner critic and how to work with that inner critic to empower yourself to have more love and pleasure, as you say, in your life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And this could be a great practice for you guys who are listening. Is there a little voice that goes, ooh, that sounds kind of fun? Don't push that down. List that's you. So if you're called to this, that's great. And if you're not, that I trust that too. So just really know that use even this moment as a practice of listening to your higher knowing that says, ooh, there's something for me over there. Or kind of there's a contraction of like, not right now. So continue to practice that, because that will be your true guide.
That's great advice for everything.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's always fun, and we'll do it again soon.
Sounds good.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.